Anybody know what that show is? It's Game of Thrones. It's probably not a surprise because it's probably everyone's favorite show these days. Okay, maybe not everyone, but a lot of people these days consider Game of Thrones the best show on TV. It is amazing. It's really indescribable how amazing it is. There are a ton of things that go into making this show good. Of course, the writing, the directing, the cinematography, the set design, everything is so good. The editing, the music, the costume design. So when I had the chance to go see and hear a talk from the director and the cinematographer of episodes 1 and 7, which are the first and last episodes of season 7, which is, when I'm making this video, the latest season that's been released, there was no way I was going to miss it. Obviously, because I love the show, and to get a little sneak peek into the behind the scenes of the show and what goes into making it is just really cool to hear and see. But also because, and if you've seen some of my previous YouTube videos in the last couple months, and if you haven't, they're linked below, but if you've seen them, you know that I'm on a little bit of a journey to try and become a filmmaker myself. So going to this talk gave me an opportunity to get some insight from some pros that I really admire. I went there with a specific reason in mind outside of just hearing about the Game of Thrones stuff, which was awesome. But the reason I went there with regards to myself and my goals was to ask a specific question if I was given the opportunity. And that I was. It helped that I was sitting in the front row, but if they didn't take questions, I wouldn't have really been able to ask the question. But they did, so I asked the question. And the question that I asked was, for a person in my position who has 2 kids and a full-time job and probably needs to keep that full-time job to support those kids and pay for the house that I live in, how would these guys, Jeremy Podeswa, the director, and Greg Middleton, cinematographer, both Canadian guys, how would they go about becoming a filmmaker if they were in my position? What advice would they give me? Assuming that film school is not an option, because based on what I just said, it really isn't an option. So first thing, I didn't get laughed off the stage or out of the room. They actually received my question pretty well. And that's probably because as adults, they know what the life an adult lives is. And going back to school and, ditching all that is probably not a possibility. But what they also know is that there isn't one specific way to being a filmmaker. So the advice they gave me was with that in mind. And it was actually really helpful advice. A lot of it I already knew, but some of it I didn't. And hearing it from them, even though I already knew or thought it, is helpful because it helps cement those thoughts in my mind as right ones, as ones that might work for me. So I'm going to share what they said. So the first thing that Jeremy Podeswa mentioned, who is the director, he said to become a part of a film collective. That was big for him when he was coming up. That means go to a place where you can find like-minded people and do like-minded things together. That is, make movies together. Talk about what you're going through together. Find solutions to your problems together. This is ideally in a spot that is physical, where you can be face-to-face and work together. But it's not the only option. For me, the first thing that jumps to mind is YouTube. There are so many people pursuing becoming filmmakers and actually doing what they love in terms of making movies on YouTube, and they're sharing their process, they're sharing their obviously their work, and then they're interacting with people. That is a collective. And so I'd love to start on YouTube, but I also would love to find a place that is welcoming and open and supportive here where I live in Vancouver. Next thing that Podeswa mentioned was finding a mentor. And I understand this fully because when I was going through my broadcast training and wanting to become a sports broadcaster, I knew how important it was to find someone to sort of take me under their wing. I found a couple people who were a little ahead of me, who gave me advice and who I could feel comfortable going to ask questions, and who I also watched go through their journey. These people also allowed me to get in places where I otherwise probably would not have been able to get. In terms of filmmaking, that means finding someone who can bring you on set, who can expose you to the real life of making movies, something that you wouldn't be able to do if you didn't have their relationship or mentorship. It obviously makes a lot of sense in relation to filmmaking, because if you get on set, if you see all the different pieces that go into making that puzzle, you're only going to feel more comfortable when you're there and you're in charge and your feet are to the fire. You don't want that to be the first time that you're in that environment. Next up, both Podeswa and Middleton said that if I'm not going to film school, to figure out a way to go to my own film school. And it's funny because Middleton, who is a cinematographer, actually referenced websites like No Film School, which is something that anyone who is interested in making movies or videos has gone to online as one of the sources of great film knowledge, of education, of how-tos. It is a type of film school. To do that as much as possible, to access all those wells of knowledge. I think of Roger Deakins' website. I think of other websites, Shane Hurlbutt. I think of other websites that just give you information for free, or sometimes you got to pay for it, like the masterclass that I'm currently taking from Ron Howard. There are so many resources out there that if you choose the right ones and get a good breadth and depth, you could actually end up getting such a hearty and wholesome film school experience without actually going to film school. The most important thing is immersing yourself in anything and everything related to the craft. The advice of making your own film school is related to another thing that they both mentioned, and that was to find your voice. And doing all those things, going to those websites and learning as much as you can will help you figure out what type of story you want to tell and what type of movie you want to make. And that also comes with experience in my mind. Going through life and experiencing different things will help you figure out what you're passionate about, what you're not passionate about, what story you want to tell and how you want to tell it. The more you go through in life, the more perspective you get, the more you know about yourself and the more you know about the world. Here's Podeswa saying something similar in an interview that he did around the same time that I went to this talk.
You know, the reason to make a film is to find something that you're passionate about, or find a film that has something to say that you want to say, and that you can really, like, for me to take time out from all my other work and really focus on a film, it's not going to be about money, it'll be about doing something that I really care about.
Luckily for me, I feel like I've gone through a good chunk of my life already, and I've learned a lot from it, which helps me know and feel what type of story I want to tell. But what also helps in that case, and they said this as well, is watching a lot of movies. Watch as many as you can. See what you like, see what you don't like, and then figure out how those things were done. That is just as important as anything that can be written in a book or on a website. So the last piece of advice, or the last two pieces of advice that they gave, was to make movies. That is obvious. If you want to make movies, you need to make movies. And every filmmaker that I admire and have looked into in terms of their background has said that they started making movies when they were, a certain age, a kid or a teenager in university, and they own their craft by making movies. You can't make a great movie until you make a bad one. So you might as well start making the bad ones now. That's a given. I understand that. But and this is the one piece of advice that I didn't really consider before going to this talk, so consider it a success. But Podeswa mentioned that it's important to figure out how films are made in the area that you live. You could try and finance a film on your own. And a lot of the time, these people that I was talking about, and obviously me too, will have to finance films on your own. You have some money or you don't, but you want to make a movie, so you make it however you can. But eventually, if you want to make a movie that is maybe a bit out of your means, you're going to have to figure out a way to do it. And that's where figuring out who funds movies and how in your area or outside of your area is important. So that's something that I'm going to start looking into. I know that there's a grant that's coming up, a deadline for it is coming up. It's called Story Hive, and it's sponsored by TELUS, where, I think $30,000 is given out to 40 people to make movies or shows, and that sounds amazing. So it's things like that, according to Podeswa, that will help you advance your goal of being a filmmaker, because it helps you make things that are beyond your means and that you couldn't make otherwise. And it also gets you into the practice of funding films, because if your goal is to be a major filmmaker that is making films on a large scale, you're going to need to get them funded. And there's a whole process to doing that. So why not get started now? So this was all great advice, and I take it to heart, and I'm going to pursue it. I've already begun pursuing it. But one thing I learned from pursuing a different career, and that was my career in journalism, and actually getting to a place that, I was proud of, was that there isn't one clear route to getting where you want to be. And that's certainly the case, I think, for me in filmmaking. I'm not going to be able to go to film school. I'm not in my 20s. I can't stay up all night and do something because I'm going to feel it the next day. And also, my kids are getting up at 6 in the morning. So, what I do now is going to be different than someone in their 20s. And someone in their 50s. But that's not to say one of us is going to succeed and the other of us isn't. That's just to say that how we're going to get to our goals and how we're going to achieve our goals is going to be different. And so this is all good advice. It helps me in my situation, and I can't wait to get going. But I know that to make this work for me, I'm going to have to do it my way. Anyways, I hope this advice helps you if you're considering pursuing filmmaking or any career, because a lot of this is applicable in terms of, hard work and paying your dues and educating yourself and mentorship. This is all kind of universal information and universal advice. So hope it helps you. If it does, leave a comment below. Let me know where you're going, where you're heading, what the goal is. If you like the video, give me a thumbs up. That helps. And of course, if you want to see more, you can always subscribe. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.